When a 19-year-old walked into court, the room dismissed him as just another overconfident teenager. By the time he walked out, he had turned the smirks into stunned silence, proving he was far more brilliant than anyone could have imagined. Meet Ethan Carter, a young man who had spent years quietly studying the law, yet was instantly dismissed because of his unassuming appearance. Standing across from him was Judge Olivia Hartman, a sharp and formidable presence on the bench, known for her no-nonsense approach and piercing judgments. To her, and most in the room, Ethan was just another teenager in over his head. What began as a simple traffic dispute, a minor speeding ticket, quickly escalated into a moment that would redefine expectations. The odds were stacked against him: no legal representation, no polished suit, and a courtroom full of doubters. But Ethan had something far more powerful: knowledge, resilience, and a determination to prove himself. This is a story about challenging assumptions, overcoming biases, and the extraordinary power of preparation. It's about how one young man not only cleared his name but reminded an entire courtroom of the purpose of justice. Buckle up for an inspiring journey that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about appearances and potential. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, a low hum of restless energy filling the air. Spectators shifted in their seats, exchanging skeptical glances and muffled whispers. The Kingsford County Courthouse was no stranger to high-stakes cases. But today the tension felt unusually charged, as if everyone sensed something unexpected was about to unfold. At the defense table stood 19-year-old Ethan Carter. He was a slender figure, his shoulders slightly hunched under the weight of the moment. His clothes were unremarkable: a wrinkled shirt a size too big and scuffed sneakers that betrayed his modest background. Clutched in his hands were a few disheveled papers, the edges bent from his nervous grip. His eyes darted around the room, catching the faint smirks and dismissive stares of the audience. Across the room sat Judge Olivia Hartman, her imposing figure framed by the high bench, known for her sharp wit and no-nonsense demeanor. She was a veteran of the courtroom, feared by those unprepared and respected by those who could stand their ground. As she adjusted her glasses and peered down at Ethan, her expression conveyed skepticism. To her, this was yet another young person wasting the court's time, a trivial case that would likely end in quick dismissal. "Mr. Carter," she began, her tone clipped and precise, "do you understand that this courtroom does not tolerate unpreparedness?" Her words were punctuated by a subtle smirk, a sign she had already judged Ethan's chances. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice faint but determined, as if every ounce of courage was carrying his words. "Yes, Your Honor. I understand." The faint chuckle from the gallery hit him like a cold gust of wind. But he tightened his grip on the papers, refusing to falter. The spectators' amusement wasn't subtle. Most assumed this teenager had no business defending himself in such a setting. Whispers floated through the room, their tone mocking and dismissive. Ethan glanced down at his papers, momentarily shaken. But his resolve remained intact. Judge Hartman leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "Very well, Mr. Carter. Let's see what you've got." Her words were almost a dare, delivered with the kind of authority that could make anyone second-guess themselves. The courtroom fell into a tentative silence, broken only by the occasional cough or shuffle of feet. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation. A room full of people ready to watch what they believed would be an inevitable failure. What they didn't know was that Ethan Carter was about to prove every single one of them wrong. Ethan Carter took a deep breath, the sound of his heartbeat nearly drowning out the murmurs in the gallery. His hands trembled as he gripped his disheveled papers. But his eyes held a quiet determination. This wasn't just about defending himself, it was about proving he belonged. But beneath that uncertainty lay a quiet determination. He wasn't just here to defend himself, he was here to be heard. He began with a steady voice. "Your Honor, I respectfully request the court's attention as I recount the details of the incident." He glanced briefly at the gallery. The skeptics who had laughed moments ago. Before focusing entirely on Judge Hartman. Ethan recounted the events of the day in question with startling precision. He described the time of the alleged violation, the exact location where the officer had stationed their radar gun, and the road conditions at the time. At 3:42 p.m. on the 14th of last month, I was traveling westbound on Kingsford Avenue. The officer claims I was driving at 52 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. However, based on the conditions and the officer's position, this reading cannot be accurate. His words were methodical, each detail carefully laid out. Ethan reached for his hand-drawn diagram, holding it up for the courtroom to see. Though simple and unpolished, the diagram was remarkably detailed, showing the precise angles and distances involved. "This," he explained, pointing to a marked spot on the diagram, "is where the officer was parked. The radar gun was used at an angle that exceeds the parameters outlined in California Vehicle Code Section 40802B, which states that radar accuracy diminishes when used at an angle greater than 15 degrees. Judge Hartman raised an eyebrow, momentarily pausing her note-taking. The murmurs in the gallery, previously amused, now carried a tone of intrigue. Ethan continued, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. "Without proper calibration records, the reliability of the radar gun is questionable. Additionally, the officer's report does not account for nearby traffic, which could have interfered with the reading." The courtroom began to shift. Where there had been quiet chuckles, there was now attentive silence. Even the seasoned attorney representing the prosecution leaned forward slightly, a frown creasing his brow. Ethan's arguments were not the ramblings of an unprepared novice, they were clear, logical, and rooted in an impressive understanding of the law. Ethan's composure grew stronger with each passing moment. His delivery, though humble, carried an air of quiet authority. The gallery, once dismissive, now hung on his every word. Even Judge Hartman found herself watching him more closely, her skeptical expression softening into one of genuine interest. By the time Ethan paused, the courtroom felt completely different. The young man who had been underestimated by everyone in the room was no longer a subject of ridicule. He was someone to be taken seriously, a legal mind unfolding before their eyes. Ethan Carter approached the podium, his hands clutching his notes tightly, the faint tremble in his fingers betraying his nerves. The weight of the room pressed on him, every skeptical eye, every dismissive smirk from the gallery, and the stern gaze of Judge Olivia Hartman. But Ethan had prepared for this moment. And as he took a deep breath, his resolve began to steady. "Your Honor," he began, his voice quiet but clear, "I respectfully ask for the opportunity to explain why this case lacks the necessary evidence to proceed." The room, still skeptical, shifted slightly, a few murmurs rippling through the gallery. Ethan ignored them, focusing entirely on his task. He began recounting the events with striking precision. On May 14, at exactly 3:42 p.m. I was traveling westbound on Kingsford Avenue. The officer stationed his vehicle here. He pointed to a mark on the simple, hand-drawn diagram he had placed on the evidence table on the south side of the street, hidden by parked vehicles. According to his report, I was clocked driving 52 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. Ethan's voice grew steadier as he continued, breaking down each detail of the incident. The conditions at the time included moderate traffic, with several vehicles traveling parallel to mine. The officer's radar gun was positioned at an angle exceeding 20 degrees from the flow of traffic. This is significant because, according to California Vehicle Code Section 40802(b), radar readings taken at such an angle are prone to error and may not be admissible. Judge Hartman's pen, which had been moving briskly across her notepad, began to slow. The courtroom, which had been restless moments before, grew quieter. Ethan's arguments were calm, deliberate, and surprisingly well-informed. He stepped closer to the evidence table, holding up his diagram for the court to see. Though unpolished, the diagram was detailed, showing the officer's position, the direction of traffic, and the angles involved. This diagram demonstrates why the radar gun's reading cannot be considered reliable under these conditions. Additionally, I respectfully ask whether the calibration records for the radar gun have been submitted as evidence. Ethan's question hung in the air, catching the prosecutor off guard. The seasoned attorney shifted in his seat, muttering, "We don't have those records readily available, Your Honor." Ethan nodded, his confidence building. Without those records, the reliability of the radar reading is in question. The foundation of this case rests on evidence that cannot be verified. The gallery, once dismissive, now leaned forward in their seats. Judge Hartman, her initial skepticism fading, studied Ethan with growing interest. The quiet whispers of disbelief transformed into murmurs of approval. With each point Ethan made, the courtroom's perception of him shifted. No longer was he a naive teenager, he was now a formidable voice of reason and logic. Ethan Carter stood at the podium, his steady voice carrying through the courtroom. Each point he made seemed to chip away at the prosecution's case, revealing cracks that no one had noticed before. Judge Olivia Hartman, initially disinterested, now leaned forward in her chair, her sharp eyes fixed on the young man. The courtroom, once filled with quiet laughter and dismissive whispers, was now silent, every spectator hanging on Ethan's every word. Ethan turned back to the diagram he had drawn, pointing to the officer's position during the alleged speeding incident. Your Honor, the officer's radar gun was positioned at an angle greater than 20 degrees to the flow of traffic. As per California Vehicle Code Section 40802(b), such positioning can result in unreliable readings, without evidence to prove otherwise. This raises serious questions about the validity of the evidence presented. The prosecutor, a seasoned attorney with decades of experience, interrupted, his tone edged with frustration. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The radar gun used is standard equipment, and its accuracy is rarely disputed. Ethan didn't flinch. With all due respect, Your Honor, he replied, his voice calm but firm. The law does not rely on assumptions. It relies on verified facts. If the calibration records for the radar gun are unavailable, then its reliability cannot be presumed. Judge Hartman raised an eyebrow, her pen hovering above her notepad. "Counselor," she said, turning to the prosecutor, "do you have the calibration records?" The prosecutor hesitated, visibly flustered. "No, Your Honor. We don't have those records available at this time." Ethan nodded, his expression neutral but his words pointed. "Your Honor, without these records, the evidence against me is incomplete. The burden of proof lies with the prosecution, and they have not met that burden." The gallery murmured in disbelief. The spectators, who had initially dismissed Ethan as an unprepared teenager, now watched in awe as he dismantled the case with precision and composure. Even the officer who had issued the ticket seemed to shift uncomfortably in his seat. Ethan wasn't done. Furthermore, he continued, holding up a copy of the officer's report, "There are inconsistencies in this narrative. The report states that the radar reading was taken from a stationary position, but the officer's own testimony indicates he was moving when he observed my vehicle. This discrepancy further undermines the reliability of the evidence." As Ethan confidently dismantled each argument, Judge Hartman's initial skepticism gave way to genuine respect. The sharp, dismissive gaze she had worn at the start of the trial softened, replaced by an admiration she hadn't expected. For the first time in years, she felt truly humbled. "Mr. Carter," she said, her tone less sharp than before, "you seem to have an unusually thorough understanding of the law. Where did you learn this?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, glancing down at his notes. Then, with quiet confidence, he looked up and replied, "Your Honor, I've been studying law since I was 13. I passed the bar last year." The courtroom erupted into stunned gasps. Even the prosecutor leaned back in his chair, his disbelief evident. Judge Hartman's eyes widened slightly, though she quickly composed herself. "You're telling me," she said, her voice steady but tinged with surprise, "that you're a licensed attorney at the age of 19? "Yes, Your Honor," Ethan replied. "I may not look the part, but I've dedicated years to studying the law. I believe in fairness and justice, and I came here today to ensure I was treated with both." The gallery was now captivated, their earlier mockery replaced by admiration. Ethan Carter, the young man they had dismissed as out of his depth, had proven himself to be a legal prodigy. Judge Hartman's demeanor shifted entirely. Gone was the dismissive tone, in its place was a genuine respect for the young man who had held his ground against overwhelming odds. "Mr. Carter," Judge Hartman said, her voice carrying a hint of warmth, "you have made a compelling case. Please continue." The courtroom was so silent it felt as though even the walls were holding their breath. Every eye was on Judge Olivia Hartman as she sat at the bench, flipping through the neatly prepared motion Ethan Carter had submitted. Her expression was unreadable, her sharp features betraying no hint of the decision she was about to render. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, an unspoken tension that kept everyone rooted in their seats. Ethan stood at the defense table, his posture calm but his hands clasped tightly together. He had laid out his arguments with clarity and precision, systematically dismantling the prosecution's case. Now, all he could do was wait. Judge Hartman finally set the motion down and removed her glasses, taking a deep breath before addressing the courtroom. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice measured but softer than it had been earlier, You have demonstrated an exceptional understanding of the law. Your preparation, attention to detail, and ability to present a logical argument are remarkable, especially for someone of your age." Ethan nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Your Honor." Turning to the prosecutor, Judge Hartman continued. "The defense has raised significant concerns about the reliability of the evidence presented, particularly the radar gun's calibration and the inconsistencies in the officer's report. Without these crucial elements, the prosecution cannot meet its burden of proof." The prosecutor, visibly flustered, opened his mouth as if to object but thought better of it, sinking back into his seat instead. Judge Hartman picked up her gavel. "Therefore, I am granting the defense's motion to dismiss the charges. This case is dismissed." The courtroom erupted in applause. But what Ethan didn't yet realize was that this moment would echo far beyond these walls. The sharp crack of the gavel echoed through the room. And for a moment, the courtroom remained silent as the decision sank in. Then, a ripple of applause began from the gallery, growing louder as spectators rose to their feet. People who had laughed at Ethan just moments before were now clapping, some even cheering. Ethan turned to face the gallery, his expression one of quiet humility. He gave a small nod of acknowledgement but didn't bask in the applause. Instead, he collected his papers, tucking them carefully into his folder. As Judge Hartman stepped down from the bench, she approached Ethan and extended her hand. "Mr. Carter," she said warmly, "you have a bright future ahead of you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Ethan shook her hand, his grip firm but respectful. "Thank you, Your Honor. That means a great deal to me." Judge Hartman gave him a rare smile before turning and leaving the courtroom. As Ethan walked out, the buzz of admiration and disbelief followed him like a wave. He had come to defend himself but had ended up inspiring an entire room, and this was only the beginning of his journey. Ethan Carter's story spread like wildfire. But it was more than just a viral sensation. It became a spark for conversations about bias and the untapped potential of young people often overlooked by society. Headlines blared, "Teen legal prodigy stuns courtroom," and "19-year-old wins case against all odds." News outlets scrambled to cover the story, dissecting every moment of the trial and marveling at Ethan's poise and brilliance. The online reaction was overwhelming. Videos of Ethan calmly presenting his arguments racked up millions of views, with comments ranging from awe at his intelligence to outrage at how he had initially been underestimated. "This kid is the future of law," one viewer wrote. Others debated the deeper implications of his story. How often do we judge people by appearances instead of giving them a fair chance? Despite the attention, Ethan remained humble in interviews. Standing before reporters, microphones thrust toward him, he shrugged off the fanfare. "I just wanted fairness. Like anyone else," he said simply. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong, it was about standing up for what's right. His sincerity only added to the public's admiration, as people saw him not just as a legal prodigy, but as someone deeply grounded in principle. Back at home, Ethan's mother, Sarah, watched the news coverage with a mixture of pride and worry. "You were incredible, Ethan," she told him, pulling him into a tight hug when he returned. "But this attention, it's a lot. Are you ready for it?" Ethan smiled softly. "I didn't do this for attention, Mom. I did it because it was the right thing to do." The newfound fame brought with it a flood of opportunities. Prestigious law firms reached out, offering internships and mentorships. Universities sent invitations for guest lectures. Advocacy groups wanted Ethan to become a spokesperson for youth empowerment and justice reform. At the same time, however, critics emerged, questioning whether his success was a fluke or attributing it to luck. He got lucky with one case, some skeptics claimed. Let's see if he can do it again. Ethan took it all in stride. I know there will always be people who doubt me, he said in an interview. That's okay. What matters is that I keep learning and growing. The attention also sparked broader conversations about systemic bias and the challenges young people face in being taken seriously. Ethan's story wasn't just a viral moment, it became a catalyst for discussing how society often underestimates individuals based on their age, appearance, or background. Through it all, Ethan stayed focused on what mattered most, his passion for the law and his desire to make a difference. For him, this wasn't the end of his journey, it was just the beginning. Ethan Carter's story became more than just a viral sensation, it evolved into a powerful reminder of the lessons often overlooked in everyday life. At its heart, his journey underscored the dangers of bias, the value of perseverance, and the transformative power of giving someone a chance. Judge Olivia Hartman, reflecting on the trial, admitted the experience had deeply affected her. That day taught me more than years on the bench ever could, she said in a televised interview. Ethan reminded me that justice isn't about assumptions, it's about truly listening and being open to what each person brings to the table. Ethan's success resonated far beyond the courtroom. For young people, particularly those from marginalized communities, he became a symbol of resilience and possibility. His story showed that brilliance, determination, and hard work could thrive in the face of skepticism and prejudice. Schools began inviting him to speak to students about overcoming barriers, while advocacy groups highlighted his case as an example of what happens when society looks beyond appearances. Ethan Carter is proof that talent and determination can come from anywhere, one commentator noted. We just have to be willing to see it. For Ethan, the experience reinforced his belief in the importance of fairness. Everyone deserves a chance to be heard, he said. Because you never know who might surprise you. Ethan's story reminds us that assumptions are easy, but fairness takes effort. His journey challenges us to look beyond appearances and see the true potential in others. Let this be a reminder to never judge a book by its cover and to always approach others with an open mind. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience and triumph.